reach out to you. If you want to make sure your correct email is in there, you can type that in too. Also, we will have a Q&A, and we will send that out to you probably in a few weeks. And we are also recording this morning. So, Jeff Shears, Education Administrator, Local Agency System Support Office from the Improvement Accountability Division, will speak now about the Local Control Accountability Plan. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, now good morning, everybody. So I have some things that I can share with you. We have been working with the CDE, has been working with the state board staff and the governor's office to have an executive order published regarding the LCAP and the LCAP process. We expect it out today, and I can give you some high level what we think is going to hear. So this is, I'm going to use language like most likely May. This is what we believe is pretty close to the ballpark of what the executive order will address. Most likely the 2021 LCAP will be delayed until a submission deadline of December 15th. Most likely the 3-year LCAP, it may be delayed and it will most likely be delayed to be implemented in the 3-year cycle beginning with the 21-22 school year. So the 3-year LCAP that was a template that was adopted at the state board's January meeting will begin and be implemented through 21-22 through 23-24. With that, and with the delay of the LCAP to December 15th, the LCAP and the budget approval process will be decoupled most likely, and with that there would be some language about the approval process of the budget, regarding LCAP approval prior to a budget approval, and that language, or the EO the executive order should address that type of details. With that, most likely is going to be a requirement to provide an update, if you will, an operations update that would be submitted with the budget, the local governing board or body, and with that, we'll just address some overall high-level information of how the LEA is responding to the COVID-19 outbreak and how they are making changes to the program offerings in response to that, and talk about how the steps the LEAs are taking to deliver high-quality distance learning and overall seeing to the needs of the students during these unprecedented times. With that, then also is if we have a 2021 LCAP and it's delayed until December 15th, and then the 3-year LCAP template is delayed until the 21-24 school years, and it begs the question of what do we use for. And again, anticipating language that would have the CE work with state board staff based on or waiting for legislative guidance or action to kind of give us what the LCAP in 2021 would look like. And then, depending on the flexibility that is given to us, then we would work with stakeholders much like we did to create the 3-year LCAP template. Is go out to the public, to stakeholders, and try to develop a template and an LCAP that would best meet the needs of all, given the parameters that would be given to us. I think that's about all I can tell you. I'm looking at my notes and what we hope will be coming out. When it does come out and it is finalized, the language is finalized, we'll have a set of FAQs that will be posted on CDE's LCAP webpage. If there's a specific form that is needed for this update, if there is an update for July 1 with the budget, we would develop that and that would also be posted with the LCAP template on the LCAP page. Give me a second here. With that, we believe that most likely the budget overview for parents would also be pushed to the December 15th deadline. And not sure how and what and how local indicators may or may not be implicated or addressed in this particular. So with that, I can try to answer some questions. I can say I don't know pretty well in 3 or 4 different ways. That's what I have.
Jeff, you have a question. How does this affect SPSA?
Okay, so it does not, as far as we know, thank you, Jenny, as far as we know, the SIPSAs and the school plans will not be addressed in the executive order. I believe that Lori later will talk about, I haven't seen the agenda with CSI plans, but it really does not address the SIPSAs because there's no specific timeline outside of CSI and ATSI for the implementation of plans, development of plans. So they can still develop it now for the fall. They can develop it in the fall. A previous executive order, and I don't have that number in front of me, waived some of the requirements for Open Meetings Act for the Brown Act and Bagley team. And while the committees that are required for the development of the LCAP are addressed in the Green Act, or that is another thing. I think they're going to align the Green Act with the Brown Act executive order. But it is similar enough that we have been given the guidance that you can use that executive order. We'll get it up here. So you know, I believe it's in. Thank you, Heather. It's in 2520. It's on page 4, and I think it's number 11 if I remember correctly. But what it does is it allows some flexibility in holding open meetings virtually, and so an LEA could do that as they develop either now for the fall or in the fall.
Should districts be doing annual updates for now?
That's a great question, and I believe that I would wait until the executive order comes out. Hopefully it's going to come out today, and that would address it. But we believe it's going to be along the lines of the requirements for the 2021 LCAP. Hang on, I'm looking for one thing here. So the template, the metrics, you know, the process and the annual update should be addressed in the executive order. In that, we'll be seeking legislative guidance and then working with stakeholders to develop those requirements. We believe that the 1920 LCAP annual update template would be a lot of COVID-19 did not implement. So we're looking at potentially some changes to that so we can address the new norm, as it were.
So, Jeff, if the LCAP is delayed and the SPSA should support it, would that deadline also be pushed to 12/15?
It certainly can. Again, the SIPSA, as we understand, the SIPSA, it will not be or is not going to be executive order. And if both federally, except for those schools for CSI, TSI, and I defer to Lori for that, on that expertise, that you can align in the fall as you develop the LCAP in the fall. There is nothing that prevents you to do that.
There's also a question about those small districts that use their LCAPs as their SIPSA. So I think you addressed that, but is there anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's true. We don't anticipate any change to the language in the executive order to change the language of, I believe it's 64001J that allows the single school districts and charter schools to use their LCAP as their SIPSA. Certainly, as it stands now, an approvable LCAP meets the school planning requirements of a school-wide program if it includes Title I funds. There's some additional requirements to have that meet the planning requirements for CSI, and we would make that evaluation, and it may or may not require some additional information within the LCAP, but we do not believe there's any changes that would disallow single school districts and charter schools to use the LCAP as their SIPSA. It would still just need to meet the planning requirements, and we would certainly work and provide that guidance of what would be needed to do such.
There's another question about, do you anticipate language coming out about the updates regarding flexibility for S&C spending?
So S&C as it stands now is not a spending requirement. It's a requirement to increase. I do not believe that there's any anticipated language in this executive order that would change any of the requirements to meet the needs of the unduplicated students and the allocation, the increase of allocation based on the number and concentration of those students.
Will county offices still have to approve the CSI plans? If so, how and when?
We do not know how the CSI, how that is worked out at this point. I don't have that answer, and we certainly will get that information out.
There's also a question about, will this apply to the LCAP federal addendum annual update as well?
So the federal addendum, the annual update for the federal addendum is specific to title programs, and I would refer that person to the specific title programs. The federal addendum in the system itself is just a one-time only to qualify to receive ESSA funds, so that this does not and should not affect the federal addendum process.
Okay, so if the LCAP is delayed to December 15th, will it be rewritten for the June 30th date, or will it be a December date every year?
It would be just this year for the 2021 school year, and so if it rolls out as we believe that it will, should, maybe, the 2021 LCAP for the school year of 2021 will be due December 15th. The LCAP for the 21 through 24, that 3-year LCAP, will be due on or before July 1. That is, it sounds daunting as work, and I believe that's why we're waiting for legislative guidance of what the 2021 LCAP will look like, because everybody is aware of that work, and it is secondary to providing services to students and meet the needs of the students. So that's certainly on everybody's radar. But the overall, it's not a change in statute. It is waiving or extending the deadline for this year, or the 2021 LCAP, to December 15th, and then moving forward, those statutory deadlines would remain intact.
When would the operations update be due, and are there guidelines for what should be included in the operations update?
There will be guidelines once we see the language for the executive order. It's anticipated that it would be due with the budget on or before July 1. Again, I'm using squishy language. If I don't say it, it is squishy language until we see the exact language from the executive order. But the anticipation would be that annual update or the operations update would be submitted with the budget to the local governing board or body and approved, adopted by the local governing body. And it is not anticipated that it would be submitted with the budget or submitted to like an LCAP approval process. It would be adopted by the local governing board and then most likely posted on the LEA's website.
Okay, Jeff, so you are going in and out a little bit. Could you please make sure to speak into your microphone?
I certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you. So here's another question. So the 2021 will have its own template?
That is what we anticipate, yes. And with that, like I said, it would be based on legislative guidance. And then as we did, as the CDE did with developing the 3-year template, we would, go out for stakeholder feedback of what that template would look like and how best to capture the information that would be required for the 2021 school year LCAP.
Can you repeat that? You faded out. The last sentence, please.
I forgot what my last sentence was. I basically is after legislative guidance of what is required to be in the LCAP, we'll go out to the field and work with stakeholders to develop that template as we did for the 3-year template to figure out and how best to capture the information that would be required for that LCAP.
Will the operations update require a public hearing?
It has to be, as I understand it, it would be adopted at a public meeting at the same time that the local budget is adopted by the local governing board or body. Does it have to have it would align with, I understand, I don't know the details of that. I understand it would be aligned with a budget adoption process at the local level. I don't have that detail.
Will COEs provide approval or guidance on the operation update?
As we understand it, no. It will not be approved by, it will not be submitted, probably will not be submitted with the budget, nor will it need to be approved by the County Office of Education or by the CDE for COEs. But after adopted by the local governing board, most likely it will be required to be posted on the LEA's webpage. No formal approval other than the local governing board or body.
Will county offices still be approving all LCAPs for the 2021?
It is my understanding, yes.
So if the LCAPs are due on December 15th, then when do the COEs need to approve those plans?
I think the current draft language of the conversation would be January, mid-January.
So another question here. Please again clarify what the expectations are aligned with LCFF fund allocations and LCAP guidelines that need to be provided to the boards by July 1st, 2020.
If the executive quorum order comes out as we anticipate it to be so, there will be no LCAP submission to the local governing board on or before July 1. That deadline for the 2021 LCAP will be most likely extended until December 15th.
Will the new operations document allow for LEAs and charters to include all the actions and services that were implemented July 1st, 2019 through March 2020?
Allow for, I think that the hope and the intent of the operations update is an overview and a review and not a full-blown annual update. And we're trying to lessen the burden as much as we can. I do not believe, I believe that the operations update form is going to be pretty high level and not overly cumbersome. And I don't believe that you're going to be articulating specific actions that were articulated in the 1920 LCAP.
So just a clarification, is the operations update different from the plan due on 12/15?
Yes, the operations update is an overview that would be developed and adopted with the local budget on or before July 1st. The LCAP for the 2021 school year most likely will be delayed until December 15th. They are two separate forms and requirements.
So another question about that is how soon after the executive order would we be able to get out the operations update template?
So we hope to have that posted by May 1st. And it would be on CDE's LCAP webpage with the other templates.
Okay. There's one more. If districts move ahead and do the annual update, will that suffice for the operations update?
Most likely not, but I don't know that. I haven't seen the final language, but that's not the intent, as I understand it, of the operations update.
Will the executive order include any changes to stakeholder engagement requirements?
Again, for the 2021 school year, we were waiting for legislative guidance, and so until we see legislative guidance, we don't know what that will look for. The template, the metrics, the stakeholder process, it will need to be determined based on legislative guidance, and with that, we would work with stakeholders and state staff and the legislature to develop that template and the processes required to develop.
And we keep getting this question, and so I'm going to ask it just because it's come up like 7 times. Will the new 3-year cycle going into effect, will it affect the CSI, ATSI, and TSI identification cycle and the funding associated with that?
That, luckily, is not something for me to answer. I don't have that answer. I would defer to Lori Marshall for that.
Yes, we have someone else that will be probably addressing that a little bit later. So we do have all the questions, and we will be taking these questions and reviewing them after the meeting.
And Jenny, thank you for that support. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for stepping in and helping us with those questions. There's a lot of questions, and we appreciate them so much. Jeff, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yes. And Lindsay Tonatori is here to give a California Department of Education update.
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. First off, thank you, Jenny. Yes, much appreciation for facilitating those questions for Jeff. Thank you. And Jeff, thank you so much for your update. Not only that, but also I want to just appreciate Jeff, because Jeff has been working around the clock to make sure that the draft language for the executive order that are going to affect changes for the LCAP are going to be done in such a way that it's not going to penalize any of our LEAs for any of the work that cannot be done right now because of these school-wide closures and all of the challenges and barriers that we're seeing that really prevent us from being able to truly meaningfully engage with our stakeholders. So just all of you on this call, I know you have a lot of questions. Please rest assured that CDE, state board staff, governor's office, all of us are thinking and making decisions with all of your best interests in mind, because we understand the situation that you guys are in, the challenges that you face when we don't have COVID-19 closures. And so with that, we're being really, really mindful to make sure that this process is transparent and smooth for all of you. So on that note, I noticed there were a lot of questions, and so Jeff and his team have been working on a comprehensive list of FAQs that address pretty much all of the questions that I saw coming in the chat. Those FAQs will be posted after the executive order is finalized. Obviously, we are in limbo waiting for that, so we appreciate all of your flexibility, being patient as we wait for new news. So with that, just formally again, welcome. Thank you all for logging on. Thank you all. I hope that all of you are sheltering in place and staying safe and sane. I just wanted to give a couple quick updates. So as many of you know, we send out a weekly Friday email from CDE, which is we consider it to be our weekly COVID-19 email update. If you are not subscribed to that, we will be sure to make sure that link is in the follow-up email that comes after today's meeting, so please sign up. In those emails, they give a lot of an overview of new news, links to things, and also webinars. And we know we've been giving a lot of webinars. So I wanted to highlight 2 webinars that are coming in the coming week that would be of particular interest to all of you. The first one will be on Tuesday, April 21st at 1:30 to 3:30. And that webinar is going to address the first federal waiver that we received on assessment and accountability. That webinar is being co-hosted by the Assessment Division, the Accountability Measurement Division, and also Improvement and Accountability. We will be talking about a lot of different topics. Mal Zhang is here today to give you an update, and she will be going into more depth. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, that one is at capacity. However, we are looking at options to make sure that this information will be able to be shared widely. So even if you are unable to log in and participate, you will still be able to get all that information. The second webinar that I want to highlight, and I saw a question in the chat come up about this, is we did apply and receive preliminary approval from the Department of Education on getting federal funding flexibility for our title program. And so that webinar is going to be on Thursday, April 23rd, 10 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. Again, that is going to give an overview of this federal waiver for funding flexibility that we have applied and received preliminary approval for. And we will be able to kind of walk through Title I, all of the titles that are impacted by this will be represented and presented. So myself, Veronica Aguila, and Barbara Murchison will be presenting, along with our Federal Policy Liaison of Government Affairs, Joseph Sines. So we hope that you can log in. That registration link to sign up for the Thursday webinar should be in the weekly COVID email today that goes out this afternoon. However, if it does not show up in that email, we will be sure to send the registration link along with all of that information through this listserv. And that webinar on Thursday the 23rd will also be live streamed on CDE's Facebook page. So if you are unable to get into the webinar, you will be able to watch it live streamed. It will also be posted on the CDE page in the week following so that you can see that information as well. The webinar is at the same time as BCN on Thursday. Yes, Veronica did make a mention of that. So I'm not sure if she had moved the BCN meeting or not, but Veronica is presenting at that webinar on Thursday. So I'm not sure exactly what they had decided. I don't know if Elena is here today or not.
No, I don't have her speaking, but
Elena's not speaking. Okay, so BCN was moved to Wednesday. Thank you, Lori. Lori from Title III Division is on this chat. Okay, thank you so much, and I will turn it back over to Jacqueline. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to present our next speaker. And hold on, please, one moment. I'm going to... So our next, thank you, Lindsay. She's our Director for Improvement and Accountability Division. And now I'm going to present Stephanie Farland. She's the Director of the Charter School Division, and she will speak to new charter school legislation. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, I will start by saying good morning to everyone. I have been the director of the Charter Schools Division for a very short time, just a few months, since the beginning of the year. So I'm excited to present to you all. In terms of charter school legislation updates, there really aren't any new bills that are moving forward for charter schools. After last year's signing of AB 1505 and AB 1507, I think for the most part, there'll be no big charter school changes in legislation in the upcoming year. I think everyone was exhausted after 1505 and 1507. So what I will say is I don't know that this group has had a update on those, but 1505, AB 1505 made some pretty significant changes to the charter school law, really around changes to the charter appeal and renewal process, the oversight process for state board charters, authorized charters, and it also placed a moratorium on new non-classroom-based charter schools. So those were kind of the big pieces of the new law. In terms of changes to the appeals process, really some of the big changes are in terms of why a charter petition can be denied now at the local level, along with the 6 criteria in statute for several years. They added 2 new findings which can be used to deny a charter petition. One is community impact, and that is a petition may be denied if the board, local school board, district board, or county board finds that the school is unlikely to serve the interest of the entire community in which the school proposes to locate. And that can take into consideration, the district can consider the physical impact of the proposed school, whether the proposed charter would undermine existing services, academic offerings, program offerings, and whether the proposed charter petition duplicates a program currently offered by the district and the district has space in their current program. So community impact is one of the new denial criteria. The other one would be fiscal impact. And that one is a little more prescriptive in terms that a petition can be denied if the district is not in a position to absorb the fiscal impact of the charter school. And the only way that they can satisfy this criteria, the district, is if the district is in negative certification already, if it's under the authority of a state trustee or administrator, or if the district is in qualified certification and the county superintendent and FCMAT certify that approval of the charter school would result in the district moving into a negative certification. So if those criteria can be fulfilled, a district can deny a charter for fiscal impact. So those are 2 of the biggest changes in terms of the local level approval and denial process for charter petitions. Some of the other changes in 1505, the timeline was extended to review petitions. As you may know, prior to 1505, or actually currently. So these changes, most of these changes go into effect July 1st. So these haven't been implemented yet. But starting July 1st, it extends the timeline for district governing boards and county boards to consider the petition currently at 60 days, and the new law extends that to 90 days, which is very helpful for the local level. I have been working at the local level for a long time prior to coming to this position, and 60 days is often not nearly enough time to do a good for the department and the state board is that the way that the state board reviews appeals will be different. Currently, the state board, when a petition comes to the state board on appeal, we do a full review of the petition, just as the district and or county did the review, called the de novo review. standard of review. That will change. So for schools that are denied at the local levels and appeal up to the state board, really the district will now be, or I'm sorry, the state board will now only reverse a local decision if they can make the determination that there was an abuse of discretion by the district or county board. And so that's a little different. The other thing that's different is that currently, if the board is a decision of a county or district board on appeal, the charter becomes a state board charter, and the state board is responsible for the oversight along with the department of that charter. And so that will also change starting July 1, or I'll talk about this in a second, but once the new laws take into effect, if a state board reverses the decision of a local district, that charter will go back to the local area for oversight. So the state board will no longer be an authorizer of charter schools. So that's a big change for the state board and for the department and the work that we currently do around authorizing and overseeing charter schools. The changes in 1505 is around renewals and the renewal criteria of that must be considered when contemplating a renewal of a charter school. The new law basically creates 3 tiers of renewal charters based on their performance levels will fall into one of 3 criteria, either high-performing charters, low-performing charters, and then the rest will be in the middle. And as you can imagine, just based on sort of bell curve type of laws, most charters will be in the middle criteria. Really, the benefit of being at the higher end of this new criteria, the higher level, higher performing charter schools, the top level, means that a charter can be renewed for a period between 5 and 7 years. And that's a change. Right now, the renewal is 5 years straight. You can't do a renewal for 2, you can't do a renewal for 8, but when the new law takes effect, those in that higher, those in the higher bracket will, the authorizer can determine whether they want to renew them to up to 7 years, 5 to 7 years. And then low performing charter schools, if they're in the low performing criteria, which means that all of their performance levels school-wide on all state indicators are all red and orange, are not to be renewed. So that is also a change. But as I said, most schools fall into the middle category. So along with that, I'm also under AB 1505, and I don't have a PowerPoint this morning because there are some changes and some uncertainty right now about some of this because of everything that's happening. But there is on the state board on the CDE website, there is an October memo that outlined all the changes for 1505 and 1507. And so I'll send a link over to Jacqueline and she can get that out, but it is on the CDE website. So one of the other changes that is a big change is that there is now a moratorium, and this actually went into effect January 1st, 2020. There is a temporary moratorium for the establishment of new non-classroom based charters. So no petitions can be approved for a new non-classroom based charter after July 1, 2020 through January 1, 2022. So we have a 2-year moratorium on non-classroom based charter schools. If the charter was approved prior to January 1, 2020, it can actually open. But any new petitions approved after January 1, 2020 will not move forward. Also some teacher credentialing changes in 1505. You probably know that charter schools have had some flexibility on teacher credentialing for non-core, non-college prep classes. AB 1505 removes this flexibility and requires charter school teachers to have the same teaching credentials as public school teachers. And that kind of goes, they have some time. So while that begins, the provisions apply beginning July 1, 2020. Teachers employed in a charter school this year have until July 1, 2025 to obtain certification for their position. So there is some time for teachers to get the type of certification they need for their positions.
I'm sharing 1505, 1507 if you want to have your webpage up.
Great. And then the only other big, which was important, really important, that happened, the other bill that was signed was Senate Bill 126, and that took place, went into effect January 1 of this year. And it makes charter schools and the entities that manage charter schools subject to the Brown Act and the California Public Records Act, Government Code 1090, and the Political Reform Act. And those are provisions that for several years have been in legislation, have been in bills, have been trying, the authorizer community has been trying to get those signed, and that was one of the first bills that Governor Newsom signed when he came into office. So I think that's great in terms of providing a lot of clarity and transparency around the same accountability standards that school districts and county offices and other public and local agencies have to follow. And I would say those are the highlights. What I will tell you is in terms of some of the definitions in 1505, I would say that the legislation has left vague many of the definitions. It wasn't perfect. So we are right now, the CDE is beginning the process of determining where we'll need regulations for 1505 and 1507. We're starting that. I mean, we've been reviewing the law for the last several months, and we are now kind of got sidetracked a little bit the last month and a half, 2 months with all of what is happening right now. But in terms of regulations, we will be reaching out to the field within the next week to gather input and any proposed language that the field has around some of these definitions like abuse of discretion. So please don't ask me right now what that means, because we're still trying to figure that out, and we'll be promulgating regulations on that. And so that's the next step. And regulations is a long process. And some of this is going to go into effect July 1, and we will probably not have regulations in time. So we will be very much reviewing and keeping sort of tabs on what's happening locally, so that we can see, where the areas are. I know that there's probably some questions or some, about the renewal criteria, which is based on the new renewal criteria under AB 1505 is based on the 2 previous years of data prior to renewal. And as you know, with no state testing in this current year, renewals for next year will have an issue with that. And so I know that across the street from us, which would be the Capitol, they are working on trying to figure out how to move forward, knowing that we will have a fiscal year. I don't have any updates or any specifics of what will be put in place or how that will be addressed by the legislature or the governor's office, but I know that they are working on it. So that is definitely sort of an unknown, and I know people are, especially charter schools, are worried about how that's going to play out for their renewals next year. And I know that was a lot of notes. A lot of what I said, as I said, a lot of the language for the new laws can be found on our website. And you can always email me, sfarland@cde.ca.gov, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might think of. Or, you can email me and ask me for updates. We will be finding a way to update the field. Just as it's not up yet, but there will be an FAQ page on the charter school page on the CDE website, addressing any guidance. We will be putting out guidance. We will be doing FAQs on 1505 as we move forward over the next couple of months. So please check the Charter Schools Division webpage on the CDE website for updates in the coming months.
Thank you, Stephanie. I have that. Oops. Maybe you can hear me, Stephanie.
So I'm seeing a couple of questions. Guidance and regulations. Around renewal criteria without a dashboard, as I said, it's kind of out of our hands right now in terms of how that's going to be addressed. The legislature is looking at it, and I'm sure the governor's office is looking at it. So I assume soon, what I'm hoping is that we'll have an answer to how we move forward without dashboard data, academic data for this year. And as soon as we know anything, we will put it on the charter school webpage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That addresses a lot of the questions, and I also have the link to your webpage in the chat if anybody wants to click on that. The next presenter is Mao. Dr. Mao is the Director of Assessment Development Administration Division, and she will speak to the update on statewide assessment.
Hi there, Jackie.
Hi, Mao.
I'm hearing a little feedback. Is that?
Go ahead, I'll mute myself.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. As Jackie mentioned, I am Mao Vang, and I'm the Director for the Assessment Development and Administration Division. Today, I will be sharing updates on the statewide assessments with you. Next. In this presentation, I will be sharing the most recent information on the executive orders issued by California Governor Gavin Newsom and the federal waiver related to assessment, accountability, and reporting, and the process that we are working with the U.S. Department of Education. And then I will also talk about the assessment updates for the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or CAS system, the English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, or LPAC, and our high school equivalency tests, and a little bit about the physical fitness test. Next. First, California Governor Gavin Newsom issued an executive order N-33-20 on March 19th, and that was really the statewide order for Californians to shelter in place of residents to protect our health and well-being, and you are all aware of that one. However, on March 18th, Governor Newsom did issue the Executive Order N3020, which announced California's intent to pursue a federal waiver of testing or requirements. And then subsequently on March 20th, 2020, in conjunction with statements of the governor, our superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurmond, and the CDE suspended all statewide CASP assessments at that time. And then, of course, they did announce that California would pursue the federal waiver for assessments. Next. And then everything happened fairly fast. On March 26, 2020, with some guidance, our superintendent, Tony Thurmond, and the State Board of Education President Linda Darling-Hammond submitted on behalf of the California Department of Education and the California State Board of Education a waiver for the 2019-2020 school year to waive the requirements of assessment, accountability, and school identification and reporting related to assessments and accountability. So under the Every Student Succeeds Act. And the CDE and the SBE did receive approval on March 27th, 2020. And the completed waiver is available at the link provided on the ESSA website. At this time, the public comment period ended on April 15th, 2020. Next. Now let's transition to specific program information on these slides. I will provide the update on our California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or CASP. The summative assessments that are in the CASP system are the Smarter Balanced assessments for English Language Arts, Literacy, or ELA, and Mathematics. The California Science Test, or CAST. The California Alternate Assessments for ELA, Mathematics, and Science, and the California Spanish Assessment, or CSA. All of these assessments have been waived for a year of pause with no reporting data. Next. With the widespread closure of the schools in California, many local educational agencies are serving their students through distance learning. So to help or aid teachers and local educational agency staff during this challenging time, the California Department of Education is making available as an optional resource the Smarter Balanced interim assessments for use with distance learning. So more information, including instructions for accessing the interims for distance learning, are being sent to your local educational agency testing coordinators, and they should have that information. Next. For the English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, or LPAC, for 2019-20, all summative testing has been waived through our federal waiver process. However, there is the area of reclassification that is of concern. So at this point, there are two paths: students who completed testing this spring and students who did not. So if students did complete summative testing in spring 2020, local educational agencies can use the results to meet Criteria 1 eligibility for reclassification. However, if students did not complete summative LPAC testing in spring 2020, We are working with other divisions as well as our contractor to explore the option of offering the summative LPAC as an optional administration in late summer or fall, so that local educational agencies can administer the summative LPAC to students who did not complete testing in this spring, and use the results to meet criteria 1 for eligibility for reclassification only. This is not, I'm just sharing the option with you at this time. We will confirm any decisions in the coming days. As for initial LPAC, or next, initial LPAC updates. If students did not complete the initial LPAC testing in spring 2020 due to the COVID-19 and school closures, ensure this reason is documented in the student's cumulative record of file. So, because it's important of what I'm going to say next. The 45-day extension provided through Senate Bill 117 does not carry into the 2020-2021 administration. It ends on June 30th. So LEAs should administer the initial LPAC at the beginning of the 2020-2021 academic year when the students re-enroll into their new grade. LEAs will have 30 days from the first day of enrollment to complete testing, score, and notify parents of those initial results. So at this time, we have planned with our contractor to work on, for the first 6 weeks of the 2020-2021 school year, that the initial LPAC be a paper pencil format for those first 6 weeks. Further questions can be directed to the LPAC or ELPAC at cde.ca.gov. This is the email you can submit more questions that are specific to LPAC. Another quick update about, next please, student score reports. As you may be wondering how student scores will be handled this year, because we were abruptly stopped in towards the beginning or middle of testing. What we have planned now with our contractor is that any student who did complete their full summative assessment, either with the Smarter Balance, English, Language Arts, and Math, the Science test, CAS, or any of the alternate assessments for English, Language Arts, and Math, and the summative LPAC, as I mentioned, they will receive a student score report. However, for the alternate assessment for science, California Alternate Assessment for Science, and the Spanish assessment, or CSA, no student score reports will be available since these assessments have not gone through the standard setting process. However, we are exploring how to give you whatever score we have if they and should they have completed the whole test. Next, we do, our division does oversee the physical fitness test, the California High School Proficiency Examination, or CHESPE, and the high school equivalencies, such as the GED and HiSET. At this time, until there's further notice, the physical fitness test is placed on hold. The California High School Proficiency Examination administration that was scheduled for March 2021 was canceled due to the stay-in-place executive order. So at this time, the March test takers were re-registered for our June administration, should we have that in the coming days, or they were provided information on a refund. If the testing centers do not reopen in June, plans will be revised accordingly, and the same procedures will apply to the high school equivalency test centers as well. Next. So in an effort to continue support for distance learning, the CDE has made available or continues to make available the Smarter Balance, formerly called the Digital Library and soon to be called the Tools for Teachers, is available for teachers who have accounts. We are in a transition period of the Digital Library being rebranded as Tools for Teachers. So to kind of help people be familiar with the change, we are beginning to refer it to as the Tools for Teachers for now. Now, the Smarter Balance interim assessments for English language arts and mathematics are available, as I mentioned earlier, to support distance learning. And also all the CAST and LPAC practice tests and training tests are also available should teachers and students want to continue using them to support teaching and learning. Next. This slide provides you with some helpful resources. Again, I mentioned some of the direct emails that you could reach out to. However, we do have the Assessment Spotlight, which is our division's weekly newsletter. We've been trying to get out as much as we can. We haven't been making it weekly because we want to make sure we have confirmed information about certain things before we share it out with you. And you can also, there's also direction on how you can sign up for our Assessment Spotlight there. Next. Here are those emails for your reference to send any further questions. Next. And we are on Twitter, so if you'd like to follow us at CDE Assessments, we'd love to see you in Twitter. Next. So that brings us to the end of my presentation. I hope that the updates I shared today were informative for you. Our goal is to help you be successful in helping and continuing to help teachers and students. So I just want to thank you for all you do to help our students and teachers and our LEA staff navigate all these very critical but important information that sometimes it's hard for us to always get everything to you on time, but we try our best to do our part to provide you information as much as we know it, when we know it. So thank you. So I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing all the comments in the mode that I am in. I wonder if somebody could help read some of those questions, Jackie, like
Yes.
some did earlier.
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. So
Okay.
I'll start from the last one. A question was asked about ordering initial LPAC materials. We need that deadline and or if we can use materials from current administration that are left over from this year's initial.
We are working on the guidelines for that. However, from the information that I am aware of, you can continue to use your 2019-2020 materials for initial LPAC. But wait for the specific email from our contractor with your testing coordinators.
Okay, another question just popped up. Is the LPAC SA 45-day extension calendar days or instructional days?
They are calendar days.
Next. What if LPAC was partially administrated? Will those score reports be available?
No. You mean initial or summative?
It just says if the LPAC was partially administered.
I'm going to make the assumption that it's the summative. So if they only completed if they do not complete all 4 domains on the summative LPAC, they will not receive a score.
Okay. Can ETS develop an online secure way for students to take assessments at home during times of stay-at-home orders?
Yes, that's what I just mentioned when I said the Smarter Balance assessment for English Language Arts and Mathematics are available. We have been working with them. We heard from the field that this is a great need. So I believe that information may have been sent either yesterday or today. We just reviewed all the information with directions and instructions on how to facilitate that so that teachers and students can use the interim assessments for English and math in a remote situation to support distance learning where they would not need the secure browser. So please work with your LEA or your LPAC, or no, your CASP coordinators at your district, and they'll be able to provide that information for you.
When you said that ELs will re-enroll in their next grade, do you mean if they are back in school, not under shelter in place?
Yes, if they're re-enrolled and they're back in school, however school looks like in the future, I am not sure of that either. But let's say when you return to school in the next school year and they re-enroll, that's when their enrollment starts.
Here's a long one. For initial assessment administered in the fall that should have been administered during the 1920 school year, which grade level assessment will the student be administered? Their 1920 or their 2021 grade level?
If it's a new school year, it'll be in their new grade level.
How will using paper pencil for the first 6 weeks impact training of administrators?
We are working with our contractors to provide training, so be sure to work with their LPAC coordinators. There will be a process for training online.
What will happen to the initial LPAC if the stay-at-home order is still in place in the fall?
Well, we can only do with what is within our control, so we will have to see how it goes and then make adjustments as we need to. I think that if it goes into the fall, we'll get directions from like our leaders and see how we can adjust or make different decisions in the coming school year.
Please define finished LPAC. Does that mean finishing all 4 domains? Or 4
yes.
domains?
Finishing all 4 domains. Listening, speaking, reading, writing.
Okay, so if they only complete 1 domain in each composite, will they be scored, or will students be scored if they only complete 1 domain in each composite, oral/written?
Not at this time, unless if there are other reasons. But you're going into all the weeds of the business rules for scoring. So at this time, we're only confirming that we are going to score in total all the students who completed all 4 domains, because then they will have a complete score.
So districts will need to order initial LPACs for the first 6 weeks use?
There'll be directions on how to do that. Yes.
Here's a long one. I understand LPAC initial for the 2019-2020 has a 45-day extension for a total of 75 days. 30 plus 45 equals 75. The question that has surfaced is, how do LEAs assess newcomers who have moved into their LEA during school closures? They need to be able to determine proper EL level to provide adequate integrated ELD and designated ELD instruction via distance learning. Please advise.
Well, in terms of new enrollees in this school year for distance learning, we don't have a process for administering them remotely, so I cannot have a definitive answer about how to do it remotely at this time, since everybody is sheltering in place and exercising distance learning. So I would have to see if program staff, if they could email our LPAC email, we could try to address it more specifically.
Will the students that did not complete the 2019-20, what grade span will they take in the new optional window if it's confirmed?
So that is for reclassification only. So if we're talking about the optional summative LPAC that is being explored to offer in the fall, they will continue in the grade in which they were in this school year. So let's say they finish one domain or two domains or even three, but they have one left, they will just complete that remaining one. That's why they could stay in the same school grade as this year to make that happen seamlessly. So this is a lot of details about that process. So I appreciate all the questions, but we will rest assured when the time, when we have all the information in place, we will share all that with you.
Is ETS accepting test products now?
They're also sheltering in place too. So I don't have a specific answer to that. I think there's a timing that they will start opening. So if they could email the LPAC line, we will get them the specific answer.
If students finish the LPAC, will they get results? And CAA, will they get results?
Okay, so summative LPAC, like I said, if we finished, if the student did finish all 4 domains, they will get a score report. For the CAAs, those are the California Alternate Assessments. For English and Math, if they finished, completed the test, they will get scores. However, the CAA for Science, if they complete everything, we will try to get a preliminary score to them. However, the science, the alternate science has not gone through standard setting, so we will not be able to provide a score report for that one in particular.
So I got some more questions that at the bottom, and I think I'm just going to do this last one because it's kind of confusing which ones I answered, which ones I asked. So are initial LPAC training materials available May 1 for an online administration or a paper pencil administration?
Again, that's very specific that I don't have the answer off the top of my head. If they send that question to our LPAC email box, as well as, you know, we will send the specific directions and guidance to their LPAC coordinators at their district. So if they go through that route, they will get all the specific information. I am sure that I do remember that our contractor is working with our program staff to make sure that we get the information out as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you so much, Mal. You answered a lot of questions and you gave us a lot of information. We appreciate you coming on your phone and overcoming all our technological little mishaps. Thank you so much, Dr. Vang.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next, I'd like to introduce Cindy Kazanis, Division Director of Analysis, Measurement, Accountability, and Reporting Division, and Jenny Singh, Ed Research Evaluation Administrator, Ed Ridley, the Academic and Accountability Unit for the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division.
Good morning, Jacqueline. This is Cindy. And I know Jenny's on the line. She's been helping monitor questions as well.
Yes.
So we have a couple topics we're going to talk about today, but as Lindsay and Mal have already mentioned, we do have a webinar on Tuesday in which we're going to talk about some of the questions around the federal waiver and other actions around COVID-19 more in detail. So today there's a couple of topics around our updates of our differentiated assistance list, as well as the comprehensive support and improvement eligibility list, as well as a brief mention about the waiver. Next slide, Jenny. So we have been working on looking over our business rules now that the differentiated assistance list has been out for several months. And in this past month, we updated that list to remove 9 charter schools who were identified back in December from the list. This was based on a reinterpretation of some business rules that apply specifically to the charter schools, because there are different criteria for how charter schools become eligible for differentiated assistance. And of course, this was the first year in which that list was produced by the Department of Education. So yesterday, an updated memo was posted on the State Board of Education December 2019 Information Memoranda webpage. You can also see the updated list of charter schools. So essentially, we dropped from 32 charter schools that were on that list down to 23. And that link is on the slide that you see before you. And each of those charter schools have been contacted and made aware of their removal from the list. So similarly, we have been looking at the comprehensive support and improvement eligibility list. There was an issue that we were made aware of by Mal and her colleagues about the grade 6 English language arts literacy writing scores. So we reviewed the list not only for that, but also looking at some business rules and the criteria for exiting schools from who would actually for the first time exit. And in reviewing that criteria, we have 40 schools that were identified as exiting. While none of them were due to the impact of the grade 6, the rest of them are due to the exit criteria that were identified. And so the list has been corrected, is posted, and the 40 schools were contacted on Monday of this week. A letter was sent to the superintendent and copied to their principal. So we did hear from a couple of you asking about, why the removal. And you can definitely, there's a contact email a couple of slides later that tells you how you can get specific information about specific school sites. As well, we've updated our information memoranda on this topic. It was released yesterday on the February 2020 information memoranda webpage. So you'll be able to see the change in the numbers of school districts. And as folks have already mentioned, the Department of Education submitted a waiver submitted a streamlined waiver from the U.S. Department of Education. The department took advantage of that. President Linda Darling-Hammond and Superintendent Thurman submitted that on the 26th. And essentially what that waiver allows for is what now is covered in the administration of assessment requirements, but also the requirements to identify schools for comprehensive support and improvement for this coming school year, and then report card provisions. So there's a state report card that we're required to put out, as well as the local educational agency report card that we're required to put out. So essentially on the federal side, this removes us from producing a dashboard for state indicators in the fall. The requirements in the local control funding formula remain. Next slide. And we subsequently received approval for that waiver on the 27th, and the State Board of Education will be taking action to ratify the waiver at their May meeting. You can find a copy of the waiver at the link on this page, which is on the Every Student Succeeds Act webpage. And the comment period, of course, just closed just a couple of days ago, and so we're in the process of reviewing the comments that have been received, and a summary of those comments will be available in that State Board of Education item. So with that, this is the email about how to contact our office around eligibility criteria. It's lcff.essa.cde.ca.gov. And I'm going to defer any questions about funding and the removal of funding. I believe Lori's going to be speaking in a bit, but I'm happy to help respond to any questions, Jenny, or if you want to take a couple to respond to at this time.
Sure. We have a question that says, just to clarify, no new school districts were identified as eligible for DA or CSI. So there were no new school districts identified, and of course we had no schools identified, new schools identified for CSI. Another question, does removal of the 40 schools from the list have any impact on the LEA's of funding? And that's going to be answered a little bit later. And those are the only two questions we have at this point.
Great, thank you.
No, you have some more. You just have to scroll up. You want me to help you with them? There's a real long one here. I see that.
No.
Need help?
No, we don't need any help. So the new school list, new schools were added to the CI list only. We only removed schools from the CSI list, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. So there are no new schools added, only schools removed. Cindy, here's a question for you. Will there be a dashboard released in 2020?
We don't know the answer to that question at this point. It is not currently in any pending executive orders, so we are waiting for additional guidance from the governor's office, but I think at this point it's probably going to be a legislative action that will need to take place. And since the legislature is not yet back in session, right now we are still beholden to a requirement to produce a dashboard for LCFS in the fall. But we're hopeful that the legislature will, when they do return, will take care of this issue.
There's another question about ATSI schools, if they were impacted due to the change in 6th grade Smarter Balance. And no schools were impacted due to the changes in 6th grade Smarter Balances that were on the ATSI list or the CSI list. So no changes based on that. By the way, we have updated the dashboard to reflect the changes because there are some schools that did have a change in their ELA performance color. But we've notified everyone that that has been updated. The federal waiver addresses school support and improvement. How will our state accountability be impacted? Will DA be frozen?
So right now, that's what we're still waiting for legislative action on, is whether or not that this department will have to identify districts or charter schools under differentiated assistance. We've not received an executive order waiving us from that requirement, so we're being told that it'll be part of the legislative action. And since Stephanie Farland had just spoken about 1505 and some of the requirements there, you should know that really these two things are very closely linked, and I believe one of the reasons why the legislature will probably need to take action on this as opposed to being an executive order is simply because of that that close relationship and making sure that the elements of 1505 that were in place, that there can be something done for schools this coming year. So I'll also make a point, just because I know there's some folks on here that may not be able to be on the call on Tuesday. The department is still required to collect the data that we would have normally used for the calculation of the dashboard. So things like suspension rate, chronic absenteeism, course enrollments, those things are still very critical. We're going to open up those collections next month. And so for those of you that work with your CalPADS coordinators, this is really, while it's not being used for accountability potentially for this year, this is still a very important collection because things like the College Career Indicator uses multiple years of data. And so we'll be communicating more with our CalPADS directors and those that support the data collection process about the importance, while there's potentially not a dashboard being produced, there'll still be likely a reporting of this data on DataQuest. We have not been relieved from many of the federal reporting requirements either. So again, just to be very clear about the data collection process is still going going on. There has been guidance given to districts on how to calculate things like attendance, knowing that students are no longer physically in session and so on.
And I think the only question we really haven't addressed is, will all indicators for the dashboard not be released? You did somewhat address that, Cindy, but can you clarify?
Sure. So at this point, again, we have not received, we know that there are going to be indicators that are impossible to calculate. The federal requirements to produce a dashboard have been alleviated because of the federal waiver. We are waiting for the state to take action to release us from not only the state indicators, but for local educational agencies to submit local indicators. So pending that action, we are, working towards. Well, we're keeping a note of it. So I do believe that the legislature will resolve this issue, but right now it's still pending.
So we're starting to get some questions about CalPAD's guidance on what information is going to be reported for chronic absenteeism and suspension. So Cindy, do you know, is there a guidance that has already gone out or is soon to go out in regard to this?
So I thought that the last flash that went out had some information, so we can follow up with the people that are asking these questions directly. I see Rebecca and David are asking questions around chronic absenteeism. And I know that there was some specific guidance that we put out, but we can definitely make that available to participants.
Yeah. Was that Flash 175?
I think so, but again,
Yeah.
They're starting to blur together, Jenny. So,
Yes, I know.
so don't quote me.
Okay. And that's it for the questions.
Okay, well, just a last piece actually about CalPADs and data is yesterday we released, or actually I think it was Wednesday, we released publicly, while we didn't send out a press release, we released our Fall 1 collections. So you're now able to see current year enrollments as of Census Day on DataQuest rather. So for those of you that pay attention to multi-year reports such as enrollment trends and English learner trends, those are now available on DataQuest for the 1920 school year.
Thank you so much. It was great to have both of you on. We feel very lucky to have both of you this morning and give us a very much anticipated update on the dashboard and the accountability. And I see more questions, and all of these questions will be forwarded on to Jenny and to Cindy so they can address them again. And also, you can email them. So I'm going to share my screen. One moment. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. I'm having issues here. So our next speaker is Lori Marshall. She's the Education Administrator for School Improvement and Support Office, and she's at the Improvement Accountability Division, and she's going to give us a CSI update.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Let me just do a quick sound check to make sure that everyone can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
And you're working on bringing up the slide deck?
Yeah, hold on, I did it wrong. Hold on.
And while you're doing that, I did not have built into my presentation today to discuss the update to the CSI list, the school support list. So there was one question, though, that I do want to go ahead and answer now, and that was regard to funding, how the impact of the 40 schools that fell off the list for CSI, how that impacts funding. And in some instances, there are some schools, and I believe they were mostly charter schools, where their funding was impacted in that they are no longer eligible as an LEA, no longer eligible for funding. And in other situations, the LEA is still eligible for funding because they have other schools that continue to be eligible for support. But they, in that case, would no longer be eligible for that particular school. And that our office, now that the superintendents have been notified, our office will be doing some additional outreach in the coming week to those LEAs, just to make sure that we can answer any questions about the funding. And I know right now folks are reaching out to Cindy's team, and questions about the eligibility are being answered. So again, I didn't plan to address that specifically in today's presentation, but I did see that question come through and wanted to address that. Okay, so it looks like I have the ball now. So thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate these opportunities to come and provide updates, and particularly now, it's just good to connect with folks. So what I plan to do today is provide an overview of what we currently know about our school improvement under ESSA, and then the work that still needs to be done, acknowledging that we don't have all of the answers, unfortunately, today. But we will discuss some of that work now that is continuing and that we know needs to be done and that we are currently working on. Then what I would like to do is spend a little bit of time just providing an overview of our CSI grants currently for fiscal year 18 as well as the new fiscal year 19 and next steps. And then I do have a slide just to provide some helpful tips for folks that are undergoing the school improvement work, followed by my contact information. Okay? So let's start with what we know. And I wanted to actually, I thought a good way to do this would to pull out the assurance that was recently, in the waiver that was recently approved that Cindy had noted. And very specifically in that waiver, there is an assurance that California assures that any school that is identified for comprehensive or targeted support or additional targeted support in the 2019-20 school year, so that's now with the 19 dashboard, those schools that were identified, will maintain that identification status moving forward into the 2021 school year. And I highlighted this next part because I think this is going to be the area where we receive a lot of questions, where we're going to need to provide some additional guidance, and continue to receive supports and interventions consistent with the school support and improvement plan in the 2021 school year. So what that tells us is that there is an expectation that we will continue to provide support for CSI and ATSI moving forward into the 2021 school year. I would say that is the what, and the how we go about doing that is the sort of the point that we're going to need to get additional guidance from and then be able to provide. But I do have a sample timeline of what that could potentially look like later in my slide. Okay, so acknowledging the work that still needs to be done. So one idea in terms of moving forward, if you keep that assurance that's in that waiver in mind right now, one idea that we are exploring is that LEAs with schools that were identified with the 2018 dashboard that did not exit with the 2019 dashboard could revise, update as needed and as is reasonable, practicable, and necessary. And I think those are three key words that are really important right now, given our circumstances. They could revise or update their 2019-20 plans that they're currently implementing and to be used in the 2021 school year. So that's an idea that we are exploring. Again, because of that assurance, the second bullet, LEAs with schools newly identified, and I think this will be the trickier part, that schools newly identified with the 2019 dashboard that were not previously identified with the 2018 dashboard will need to develop and implement a 2020-2021 CSI or ATSI plan. And I have in parentheses there just consistent with their identification status, just to clarify that one school would not have a CSI and an ATSI plan, right? It's either one or the other. And I think the most important, I have sort of a theme in this presentation that I'm trying to highlight or in boldface font, pull out those things that I think are key, that I want folks to walk away with today. And I think key here is that the CDE is currently working with the SBE and the ED on a timeline and requirements to clarify very specifically the timeline and the expectation. But we do know, again, I keep taking us back to that assurance, because that's very important in the waiver that was just approved. So here's the proposed timeline that we are working on at the State Board and our leadership at the department is working on in terms of what that plan development. You'll see here it doesn't address necessarily or more specifically the implementation timeline, but I think right now people are really thinking about, well, if we need to develop a plan for 2021, given the shelter in place and the circumstances, how could we actually do that? And this is a proposed timeline that is getting some attention and being, a potential very viable timeline. And so if you look here, starting with March, April of 2020, that, during this time, there are likely some things that our LEAs and their schools and our county offices of education could potentially be starting now, right? Moving, you'll see my little palm tree. I think maybe that was more for me than for the rest of the folks, but there is hope. Summer is coming, right? And then as we move into the early fall, that the plan development could continue. And so it's extending the development of the plans into the fall, where we're starting to come, hopefully, back together again. And of course, everything could change, as things are evolving every day. But again, this is just a proposed timeline to work on. And that the approval at the school and the LEA level, as that is a federal requirement, that approval could start happening in the later fall of October, November, as well as then moving into, say, December, January, where the plan implementation phase could begin. And as you heard Jeff's presentation earlier, and of course we don't know what the executive order looks like, but this is a timeline that could align with the LCAP development approval timeline as well. So again, this is a proposal. This is something for folks to think about, and likely as we move forward would be able to give some additional guidance on this. But I think what this does is it gives some coherence or some expectation that that's not gone away. Okay? So let me move down on. So here are some helpful tips. So having said all of that, we know we have an expectation, and I think all would share the expectation that we do want to continue with our CSI and our ATSI work as much as is reasonable, practicable, and necessary. I think that's really important here. And that our message is safety first, always. And so we are encouraging our LEAs, pending any additional information from ED on the topic, to really think creatively and innovatively about how, and that's key, to accomplish school improvement work. We're also encouraging LEAs to leverage their local decision-making about what is best for their learning community and how to continue to support students in schools identified for CSI and ATSI. The ESSA provides a lot of flexibility at the local level. ESSA does not dictate the interventions, the strategies, and the activities for CSI. Specifically. And so here, the LEA really does have a lot of local flexibility in their local decision making about how they go about supporting schools. And then to also, in doing this, be very mindful, this is just a friendly reminder, to be very mindful of equity, access, and privacy when thinking about meetings and collaboration. And I know I see a lot of questions coming through, and Lindsay is going to help me answer those questions once we get to the end of the presentation, which means I'm going to go ahead and bypass my brief pause for questions. We'll do that at the end. And go ahead now and move to talk a little bit about funding. So with our current grants that have been implemented since March of 2019, here we're talking about the 2018-19 CSI grants for schools that were identified with the 2018 dashboard. And the timeline for reporting expenditures, we've received a lot of questions. We're providing a lot of technical assistance and support right now to our LEAs. But we had report 3 that was due March 31 of this year. And we have allowed extensions of time. We are accepting all extensions of requests by LEAs to extend the time to submit. I am happy to report that most of our LEAs were actually able to submit by that March 31 because these were expenditures that they were claiming for a period of prior to when all of this, the pandemic, the coronavirus started, right? So, but if there are some LEAs, we are reaching out to a few LEAs that have not reported and have not requested an extension. So my staff is reaching out, but we have just some instructions here on how to request an extension of time to submit that report. But I think most folks will be happy to know that the next apportionment for that report 3 is on schedule. We've not found a reason that we need to delay that, so the money continues based on our standard timeline. We have not needed to adjust that timeline, so folks will be getting their funding as regularly scheduled. We're preparing that now to be processed. And then we can also make additional apportionments for those LEAs that require more time to report. So that's what I wanted to provide with our 18 grants. I know, however, that folks have a lot of questions regarding the grants that we just started, our 2019-20 grants. And the start date for currently, there is no indication at this time that the timelines would be adjusted. So the start date of these grants was March 25, 2020, so officially the grant period has started. And the end date is still established as September 30th of 2021. I am happy to say that all applications have been received and approved, and I really want to thank the LEAs and our COE partners as well as our schools in working very hard to get their applications in, particularly during a time earlier this year when there was a lot of change going on. So thank you so much for all of the work that you've done. And the next steps with this grant is the final allocations have already been posted to our webpage. I have the link here, and yes, these final allocations do take into consideration the changes that Cindy Kazanis shared with you with regard to updating the assistance file. So here folks can see what the final allocations are. And we are on schedule. Currently, the first apportionment of 25% of the LEA's total allocation is moving through the approval process. So that allocation is on schedule, and folks will be receiving that through the process that is established. We did, with regard to the 2019 CSI grant, and again, just being very mindful to sort of separate out the 18 grants from the 19 grants here. We did, given the current situation of the coronavirus, we did look at the reporting requirements for LEAs as we move through this new grant period of March 25, 2020 to September 30th of 2021. We looked at, you'll see on this table, we have original reporting times and original due dates for expenditure reports and budgets and so forth. We had the original dates as communicated in the application for funding, and we looked very strategically about how could we be more helpful to our LEAs given the circumstance. And we have made revisions to the reporting timeline. So currently you can see that we have reduced the number of reports. However, apportionments will continue to come. There will not be a delay in LEAs and schools receiving their money. But the very first reporting period is probably the biggest shift. We moved that out from July of this year to October 31. So the end of the first the first performance period would be September 30th. So this gives LEAs more time. If you think of the timeline, a proposed timeline I shared earlier, this will give LEAs more time to work through the development phase of their plans in terms of their needs assessments and stakeholder engagement and those types of things. And when we looked at last year, we had very few LEAs that actually reported any expenditures by July 1. So we took that data into consideration. So hopefully this will be helpful for our LEAs. Okay, so this concludes my presentation. You can see here that we are obviously very open for business and very much enjoy receiving the phone calls and the continued emails for the office. We have staff that are checking emails regularly throughout the day, as well as checking phones. And I feel that we are being very responsive and able to get questions answered for folks. So keep those questions coming. So at this time, I'll work with Lindsay on some of the questions, see what we can answer for you today.
Sure. I've been tracking the questions, and Lori, I'll read them to you. And I know Jeff Bershears is still on the call. So Jeff, if you feel necessary, please feel free to jump in as well. Lori, the first question is there a list online that just shows the schools that have been dropped off the CSI list?
So I will defer to Cindy Kazanis or Jenny on that question. I do not believe so, but Cindy, do you want to respond?
Sure. No, that's not available. But if anybody wants to know what the exact schools fell off, they can email that LCFS ESSA data email that we showed at the end of our slide deck.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question. Will the funding that would have gone to the 40 schools be recalculated to those schools who still qualify for CSI?
Yes, excellent question. So that's what we actually did. So we took the funding from two things when we redistributed. We looked at the number of LEAs that declined funding, and I don't have that number today, but we did have folks that just declined the funding. And then we waited before posting until we knew the number of schools that would be falling off. So the final allocations that are posted now do include and reflect a redistribution. Just keep in mind that for the schools that fell off, the LEA could still have seen an increase in their funding amount from the preliminaries, and that is because many LEAs declined funding. So in some areas it could be a wash, and in some areas they could still see an increase. But it did take into consideration those 40 schools.
Okay, thanks, Lori. The next question is, please clarify if a school identified in 2018 has now exited, will they still receive support or funding?
They will continue to receive fiscal year 2018 funds throughout the 18-19 grant period, which ends September 30th, 2020 of this year. So we have that built in to the grant, originally when we developed the grant. So yes, that school, that LEA, and that school will continue receiving their 18 funds.
Okay, and then a follow-up to that is that what the extension means for school year 2020 to 2021?
I'm not sure I understand that question, the extension. And so fiscal year 2018-19, so that would have been the 18 dashboard schools. That timeline for the grant has not changed. There is no extension currently of those funds beyond September 30th of 2020. So the grant, the fiscal year 18 grant, is still on target to end September 30th, 2020. The new grant for the 2019 dashboard, that grant period is just beginning. And so that grant, there is no extension for that grant either at this time. And so that grant is still on schedule to end September 30th of 2021. If I didn't answer that question, if you could use our email here at ciso@cde.ca.gov, maybe we could clarify a little better to understand.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, another question, and then we have, after this one, we have some LCAP SIPSA questions. So Jeff, you might be able to help us with those too. So this question is, if schools are not approving CSI plans until October or November, does that mean newly identified schools, based on the most recent dashboard, should not be expending funds until that time?
Yes, that's a very good question. And so generally, folks would, and this is particularly if they are using their SIPSAs as their CSI plan, that I think there is an understanding that the SIPSA, that funds shouldn't be used unless the SIPSA is approved. But what I'll say that I think is very important about CSI funds is that CSI funds certainly that go into the SIPSA to support those interventions, the evidence-based intervention strategies and so forth. That's one way that funds are spent. But CSI funds can also be spent on LEA level activities, if you will, for CSI schools. So there could be a situation where funds are not necessarily in specifically, all of the funds are in the SIPSAs, right? They may be used at the LEA level to assist with conducting the needs assessment and those types of things. So, so generally, there's an idea that certainly funds shouldn't be spent out of the SIPSA until it's approved, but I think that's the conversation with the LEA about how they're using their funding and for what purpose, right? So we see that certainly funds can be spent, beginning March 25, on capacity building, on stakeholder engagement, on needs assessments and those types of things, as is reasonable, of course, under the circumstances.
Great. Okay, so here's a question about alignment to the LCAP. How does this timeline work when the application was completed to align with the LCAP and the LCAP is now possibly due December 15th?
So, Lindsay, do you want me to, or is that something that?
Lori, if you can go ahead.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. So I believe this person is referring to your proposed timeline with your country. So how does this timeline work when the application was completed to align with the LCAP and the LCAP is now possibly due December 15th?
Right. I think that those are some of the implementation challenges, and I don't know that I have a very good answer for that today. But when the application for funding was developed and it was submitted, we were under different circumstances, right? We were not facing what we are in now as significantly. And so I think that we, one, need to wait for the executive order to come out about the LCAP. And I think that that's all part of probably some of the work that still needs to be done. So once we know what that executive order says, and once folks now then start sort of backward mapping and thinking about, well, how is this impacting the SIPSA or how is this impacting the CSI plans, that there may need to be some tweaking or some moving or some thinking. What we were hoping with this proposed timeline is that it shows a very flexible and very broad time period in which to do that work and to think strategically and intentionally about how to, in some cases, maybe do some realignment if necessary. We're not going to ask that folks go back and amend or revise their applications for funding. That's not the intent right now. And so, again, by extending this timeline, by moving out, and again, this is for CSI plans. This is not for SIPSA outside of CSI. This is very specifically to our school improvement plan processes. That the original expectation is that the development and the approvals would be in place so that plans could be implemented by the start of the school year. But under circumstances, that doesn't look like that would be possible, right? So what this is doing, again, is really extending and creating more space to sort of take on and move through the work that needs to be done. And if some of that work is talking about, better alignment with the changes in the timeline to the LCAP, that could happen in this space. And I don't know if Jeff wanted to add anything in addition to that.
Too many buttons to push. No, I don't to that particular answer or question. I think you nailed it.
Okay, so moving on, because we only have a few more minutes, our plans are in conjunction with our SIPSA. How do we tie this timeline with our SIPSA?
So I think that Jeff had answered that question earlier. Jeff, do you want to maybe talk again about, there is a difference obviously in the expectation around the timeline for a SIPSA as well as with a CSI plan. Did you have any thoughts first about the SIPSA piece?
So sure, I would go with, as I said earlier, there's no statutory, deadline for the development of the SIPSA. They're supposed to be developed in time for the academic year. And so they can develop it in the fall when they come back if they so choose, or like I said, they can do it now if they want and use the virtual flexibility from the executive order for the Open Meeting Act. And Lori, you can correct me, with the CSI, they still can use the SIPSA for the to meet CSI planning requirements. We have guidance of what that would include, and the hope and the expectation is to have that developed and ready to go as quickly as possible to be implemented at the beginning.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I concur. And I think, again, that this proposed timeline gives that flexibility. It gives that space to work on, again, the alignment between timelines for SIPSAs if they're using their SIPSA, timelines in alignment with the LCAP. But certainly an expectation, again, folks, remember that assurance that we have in the very beginning that the schools will continue to receive their supports and whatnot right through the 2021 school year. So we have to make sure that we're doing that, but we're also trying to provide and be very reasonable and realistic about where we are. And so really stretching out that timeline, I think can create and provide that space.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. I want to say one quick thing is that please be checking our program pages, and we will also blast out to all of you when more FAQs are posted regarding CSI plans, SIPSAs, and LCAP. Final question is one that a couple people said, have you gotten any clarity as to whether 2018 CSI grants will be covered by the waiver of the period of availability?
Thank you.
This is a federal waiver.
Yes. Currently, at this time, we have not. So certainly what I have been telling folks is as soon as we do, we will be communicating out so that folks know. We are anxious to learn that question ourselves, but at this time, we do not have any further information. So that's why we continue with our timeline for the 18 grants are still scheduled to terminate the end September 30th of 2020 until further notice, if that even comes out.
Thank you, Lori. And again, I see one more question about everybody wants things written down. The FAQs will be the written down comprehensive guidance and answers to your questions. We're going to use all these questions in the chat and make sure those are incorporated into our FAQs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And Lori, thank you, Lindsay, for helping, and thank you, Jeff and Cindy, for coming back. Really appreciate that. It makes it such a lively event for everyone, so that you're learning from all of us at the same time. So we're all in this together. Thank you again. So I'm going to now present the next speaker, who's been, by the way, all these speakers have been on since 8:15, so I just want to also acknowledge all of you for being there. Is Amy Tan-Paterno. She's the Fiscal Services Consultant, and she is working with the Fiscal Policy Office Government Affairs Division, and she's going to give a fiscal budget update. And I'm going to pull up her. Oops, I didn't bring it. Let's see, I'm going to do it this way. Let me share my screen. One moment, please. So this is her handout, and Amy's handout is in the tiny URL. Go ahead, Amy.
Good morning. Thank you, Jacqueline. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. These are definitely some challenging times. Things look a lot different since we met the last time. Today, I'm just going to highlight some of the major actions taking place in this last month. The governor has been very clear, and we will be facing some fiscal challenges in the current year, and more so in the budget year. So last week, the governor apprised the legislature's fiscal committees of the current status of the deteriorating state budget and proposed to Speaker Nancy Pelosi an additional $1 trillion in federal relief for state and local governments. Despite California's strong fiscal position as it entered the crisis, the state may now not be able to even afford the workload budget for current authorized expenditures. So instead, the governor wrote, resource constraints will likely force further reductions and prioritization of resources. We're still being optimistic that the administration is committed to protecting K-12 schools from mid-year cuts in 1920. But according to finance, everything is on the table. The May revise will reflect effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on states' fiscal condition. So next, on the budget hearing timeline, the legislature is in recess until May 4th, but there have been discussions that the assembly budgets will start reconvening their budget hearing end of the month. On April 9th, the leaders of both houses of the legislature announced that they would be holding hearings on COVID-19 prior to the legislative return from recess. These hearings will be focused on COVID-19 spending. In fact, the Budget and Fiscal Review Special Committee subcommittee convened yesterday with discussions focused on the state's fiscal condition. The hearing lasted over 5 hours, and again, the picture was not rosy. May revision is still scheduled to be released as normal, and the 2021 budget is still scheduled to be passed by June 15th. It is expected that the legislature will revisit after June 15th with a second round of budget deliberations centered around an August revision process after personal income taxes are received. Depending on the state's financial outlook, sizable reductions may be needed at that time. Some of the COVID-19 legislative appropriation, the state SB 89 was the appropriated $500 million from the general fund for any purpose related to COVID-19. $100 million of this fund was released on March 30th to school districts, county offices, and charter schools. Federally, H.R. 749, also known as the CARES Act, appropriated $30.8 billion to the Department of Education for the Education Stabilization Fund. $13.5 billion of this money was for the elementary, secondary school. I'm having trouble hearing you. Sorry about that. $13.5 billion for the elementary and secondary school emergency fund. It's estimated that California will receive about $1.65 billion of this fund. The application for this has not been out yet. They're anticipating probably next week that we should have the applications for the state to apply for that money. There has been the $3 billion, the governor's emergency education relief fund. These funds will be split between the state governors, allocated according to poverty and population, to distribute to pre-K and community colleges based on need and impact to continue to provide education. The governor's higher ed contact will be taking the lead on this application, and we'll keep CDE posted. The application for these funds was released last Tuesday. California will be allocated $355 million. There's also $8.8 billion for child nutrition program, $3.5 billion for child care and development block grants. And I listed some waivers on there, and I know it's already been covered. So the federal government rolled out several expedited waiver listed on the handout. And CDE submitted the flexibility waiver request and has received approval for the waivers. And as mentioned by Lindsay earlier, there will be a webinar on these waivers, and we also covered these waivers earlier as well. And I also listed a few priority legislation that is really not much legislative bills are being heard, but these are all COVID related. So with that, I will open it up for a few questions.
Okay. I don't know that I've seen any questions.
I believe there's one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Will LEAs that didn't receive 1920 Title I funds receive funding under the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Stabilization Fund?
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, the allocation methodology for the stabilization fund is based on Title I formula. So there is discussion with the federal government on how are we going to fund the non-Title I schools. So based on the current methodology that's laid out, no, they will not get funding, but they are finding ways to see how we can fund the non-Title I schools, and I believe that is one of the delays for the application right now. Anything else?
Yes. Will guidance be coming out about equitable services requirements for these funds and how to allocate?
Yes. Once we get the application, we will know more what is being required, and at that time, we will definitely put out FAQs on it.
Oh, good. Okay, so again, your handout has pretty much spelled out everything you said, and it is in the tiny URL. And also they have your email.
Perfect. So feel free to email me anytime with any questions.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank
We
you.
always love hearing from you
No problem. Thank you all. Take care.
for your support of state and federal program directors meetings. And so now our next presenter has been waiting since 8:15, Clement. He's our education administrator from the Federal Program Monitoring Office. As he works at the Educational Data Management Division, and his presentation is on the federal program monitoring in the 2021 school year. Clement, here's
Yes, good morning. First, I want to say hi to my colleagues at CDE. I have not seen you in person for quite a while, so we're still not in the same room now. And then let me go ahead and share my screen for the presentation, and also say hi to those from districts around the state and counties who are on the call today. So as Amy just said, a lot has changed since this group last met. And I think that's going to be reflected in what you hear from me today. Normally at this time, I would be giving you a preview of really what's to come for next year's FPM. But really, in the spirit of what you've heard up to this point, and just to be consistent really with the other presenters today from the department, I think it's just equally important for you to hear about what's going on right now at the tail end of 1920 in the FPM world. So I think that's really where I should start, is to let you know about how school closures in a variety of districts. And then, once we get through that, if we get through that, I can also give you...
Clement. Clement,
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you. You are breaking up, so don't know what that's about, but you're cutting in and out.
Okay, let me lean in a little bit closer here. Okay, so I'm going to start today's discussion with a look at what's going on right now as far as FPM in the various districts, working through the difficulties that we are all sharing with school closures. And then after that, what I can do is provide our audience with what they can expect for next year. But again, we don't know really exactly how next year is going to look for sure. I don't believe that the executive orders that are going to be coming out shortly are going to get into the specifics of program monitoring. So let's talk about what's going on in the various districts for FPM for 1920. So what we did, and it all happened very suddenly last month, but March, April, May, and June, we still had a significant chunk of our year for reviews to do. And so what we did here at CDE was we decided that any in-person FPM review would still be conducted, but we would conduct that review online instead. Any review that was originally scheduled to be online, well, we just kept that on our schedule and moved forward with that. So the travel stopped, and the travel will not pick up until the end of the year for sure. So any review, not just the ones in March and April, but any review in May and June that we had been planning to be in person, well, that's going to be done online as well. So in addition to that, what we're also trying to do to accommodate the districts that we're working with is we're working individually with each district to extend the deadlines, similar to what you heard Lori and School Improvement. We're working to extend the deadlines. Now, we don't have a standard issue extending individual to figure out what can be done. And so let me explain the numbers that you see really quickly. So March and April, there were 29 FPM reviews, either originally in person or online, which then became online starting in mid-March. 24 out of the 29 reviews in March and April needed to have an extension of varying length. And remarkably, we were actually able to complete 7 of the reviews during the school closure period, which is kind of astonishing, really. And then, if you look ahead to May and June, we've got 20 reviews scheduled now, online, of course. We've worked out extensions for 4 of the 20, but we're still in the process of determining how long those extensions would be. We're going to try to get these all wrapped up no later than the end of June. Okay, so that's the story on timeline and what we're trying to do there. But really, there's another question of not just how long would you have to complete your review, but getting into the details of the review. What can really be done in this situation where we've got where not all of your staff are available? Sometimes you've got documents that may be in hard copy that are really the guidance here and now for our CDE reviewers is we'd like to do as much as we can, but we certainly don't want to put any staff person in any school or school district in a situation where they've got to go someplace where they really shouldn't be going. So we're going to try to continue on this path with the FPM. I'm not going to say FPM as usual, but FPM to the extent possible, which can be done safely. So we're taking into account the limitations that many of you are working under. So it really is not business as usual. That's going to be the story for any review that's ongoing right now, any review that's in resolution, and anything really for now. So looking ahead, and I know that's tough, but I'm going to still go ahead and try to give you some more information about what is coming or what could be coming your way. So for 2021, before the school closures went into effect, CDE did send out a notification for next year, and that happened on March 6th. So many of you either got it or were forwarded that notification or you've seen it. So there is a list of districts who've been identified for FPM in 2021. And at this point, nothing has really changed about that list. CDE is still hard at work with that list and working at the details of what it means for each one of those reviews, and we are still actively planning on conducting those reviews for next year. But again, who knows? I cannot promise exactly how that's going to turn out. No one can really, but we're still here. We're still hard at work, working on it as we normally would be, and then we can always shift gears if and when that time comes. So the next steps on the next slide is that we have that list of LEAs. What we're doing is we're putting together a calendar. We're putting together a list of the school sites and the different program offices here that are involved with FPM are making their selections. And it's a pretty elaborate process for each program office who participates, but we're still on schedule for putting that together. And in early May, and I'm saying approximately May 6th, that information will be ready and will be released unless we get further direction from the superintendent here that something needs to change for next year and even beyond. So the point being here is this is what we would normally be doing this time of year, providing you with that information of exactly when the FPM reviews are going to be taking place, at which sites, involving which programs. So that's still on track to be released in early May. The program instruments, okay, these are the documents that drive the work here. So we right now are in a cycle where we annually review and revise the program instruments. It started in January and it goes into May, and that process is also moving along as it normally would here at the department. And I do anticipate that this work for each of the 16 FPM instruments will be done and shared with everyone, posted on the web by around June 17th. I have a bullet here that says new instruments in 2021. And what that refers to is there's a new program instrument being developed for disaster relief grant monitoring. That would be something new. And there also may be some changes in the Title I world involving federal requirements. So again, nothing too different, but I just thought I'd mention that we do have some possible changes to instruments, at least one new instrument for disaster grant monitoring, and possibly some other segmenting involving Title I. Okay, now here is a slide here that gives you some information about in-person training. Again, let's be realistic. We don't know if we're going to be able to provide this in-person training. Hopefully we will, but again, no promises. So the slide you see here gives you the exact dates if we were to have in-person training. So if we were to have this training, the end of July, you can see the dates for the FPM training that would be in Northern California. We'll let you know exactly where. We know that in early August, we are confirmed to be at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And then our third training is going to be in Fresno County, in late January of 2021. Again, we're planning on it, but will it actually happen? That's something that really is going to be determined. So, again, we've got our web page. It may not be completely up to date in all areas, but it does give you still a good foundation of and explanations of what compliance monitoring is about here at the department. We've been collecting in the CDE box, which is the second bullet, a collection actually of program by program resources. And you can always email us at the FPM mailbox. So these here really are an update on what's going on now for FPM at CDE and what we're planning to do, again, which would be under normal circumstances as far as doing in-person reviews, having in-person trainings. So essentially, as you can imagine, everything that's in person, well, we have a plan, but I can't say for sure if we're going to be able to have in-person activities. But if we were, we would have a plan right now.
Great. So there's two questions.
Two questions, okay.
Okay, can you read them? I hate to have my feedback. How will LEAs who have current online reviews who do not have access to required documents be accommodated and not receive findings?
Okay, that's a very good question. So I just really want to be clear here that we do not want to put any staff member in any situation where they're going to a school site where they're not supposed to be, where they shouldn't be, putting them in any dangerous situation. So the guidance at this point really is that we are going to try to do our best to make a compliance determination based simply on what can be provided to us safely. And this is not business as usual. Just because we are doing a review online, which we would have been doing in person, it really doesn't mean that that a person in a district is going to be able to access everything that they normally would be, especially if they're working from home. So I suggest really that that the communication be early and often, and be very explicit about what you can get to and what you cannot get to. And my guidance really is to review staff here is do the best you can to make a determination of compliance on what can be reviewed and provided to us safely.
Next question. When will May, June extensions be finalized?
Well, they're not going to be finalized all at once. We're not going to be giving a standard length of extension to everyone. It really depends on each district's staff availability, their access to documents, and a lot of other factors really on the school district side of what they can do. So, I would like for, I'll just say this. It's very likely that there's going to be an extension. It's something that's going to be worked out between district staff and the regional lead of each review. So, for example, we have a set of reviews coming up in early May, and not all of them have been extended, but I can say that right now we are in close communication with each one of those that hasn't been extended to work out an extension. And if another extension needs to be granted after the first one, then so be it. We're not going to we're going to be reviewing that initial timeline. So, for example, in Kern, we had a extension that would have been ending today, but what we felt was best was to extend it again to next week so that we can get as much done before the close of the review. So it's really just on an individual review by review basis. Sometimes it can occur early on because we know that that there's really very little in place. Other reviews, amazingly, have gone on as scheduled and have been completed as scheduled. And then there have been a few that started, needed more time, we extended it, and then were completed. So I think that this process is working. I think it's working better than if we were to just give a blanket, say, 21-day extension, because the situations at each district are not the same.
Okay. Well, thank you for your questions, everyone. And I see some more, and we're at the end of our time. But if you could answer this last one, please. Will there be extensions given beyond 225 days? How will that be determined?
I think it's the same principle that we're using to, that we're giving extensions now. It's not going to be business as usual, so it's going to be something that's going to be worked out with each individual district. We'd like to have a really open conversation about how much time is needed, what's going to happen during that time, and come to some agreement on what is reasonable and what can be done safely, even up into the 225-day period after the review.
Thank you so much, Clement, for your thorough responses and for preparing both this year and next year's information. Thank you again for waiting all morning with us. Now I'd like to present our final speaker.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And
Welcome, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you. For the 259 of you that are still on, thank you so much for being with us. And we are so grateful that you're here today. So Rena DeRose is our Education Programs Consultant with the Federal Programs Reporting Office. And Rena is with the Improvement and Accountability Division. And she has practiced many times to make sure that everything that she speaks to today is exactly what you've asked for, which is on the Title I Part A comparability of services. And Rena is now sharing her screen. Thank you, Rena.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
I'm not sure if you all can see that.
Yes.
Do we have a screenshot? Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I hope you and your families are all keeping well. Thank you again for taking time to join us today. I'm going to be providing an overview, a brief overview on how to complete the forms related to Title I Part A comparability of services. And I welcome you to submit questions during the presentation. When submitting a question, it would be really helpful if you can include your name, first name is fine, and an email address. In the event we run out of time, please know that I will respond to each question after the fact. If you'd like additional support after today's presentation, I'm available. Please contact me via email, and I will be happy to set up a meeting to assist you with any questions you have or in completing the forms, etc. So let's begin. So our agenda is just to go over the Title I Part A comparability of services calculation forms, and this relates to ESSA Law Section 1118C. We will be completing comparability calculation forms, the full-time equivalent FTE teacher calculations form, as well as the student FTE teacher ratio calculations. Just a brief overview, the comparability of services calculations must be completed annually and in a timely manner to ensure that all schools are in a comparable position, to allow the LEA to make necessary adjustments with the least amount of disruption, and to avoid loss of Title I funding. Determining Title I Part A comparability of services. When determining comparability of services among schools within the LEA may either compare all schools within the LEA as a whole, comparing the LEA-wide average, or comparing all schools within the LEA by each grade span group individually, comparing it to the grade span group average. The California Department of Education has established specific grade span group designations based upon the grades served by a school. Each school is assigned one of the 3 allowable grade span group codes as follows. Grade span group code 1 is generally elementary grades, grade span group code 2, generally middle grades, and grade span group code 3 is generally high school. I just want to talk briefly about full-time equivalent teachers. FTE teachers hold one of the following credential statuses recognized by state law. There is a list of those credential statuses here on the slide. I've provided it to you so that you'd have a comprehensive PowerPoint to which you may refer to after today's meeting. But this information is also available on the Title I Part A Comparability of Services webpage on the CDU website. To identify full-time equivalent teachers for each school within the LEA, to identify the teachers by including only those teachers whose salaries or portion thereof are paid using state and local funds. Teachers paid with private or federal funds should be excluded from the comparability of services calculation. On the screen now you see the FTE teacher calculation form, which is available from the CDE website, Title I Comparability of Services webpage. It's a link under the resources section of the page. I'm going to take you to the page that I started to put some data into just as an example. So Title I Comparability of Services at the top of the page, this is where the LEA would create this form for each individual school within the LEA. Entering this. Pardon?
We can't see it.
Oh, sorry, I'm not sure why, but let me try here. Did that take care of it?
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that, everybody. Bear with me. First time doing this live with an audience, so thank you. Title I, Part A, Comparability of Services, Full-Time Equivalent Teacher Calculation Form. I've actually started just putting in some data on this form just to see, so you can see what it looks like. I've put in the fiscal year in this box, the LEA CDS code and name. I've just made up something, of course, a school CDS code and school name. And then I started to enter the FTE by teacher. Basically, we want you to look at the title of the teacher. You don't have to list the individual name of the teacher. You may organize it however it will help you to accurately calculate all of the FTE for the teachers paid with state and local funds by school. So in this example, I put first grade teachers 3.0 FTE, second grade teachers 3.0 FTE, and so on. I just started to complete it. I haven't fully completed it. And what the form will do is provide a total at the bottom of the page. Then you simply go back into the system, re-access the page. You can save this one and then start over with your next school and then calculate all of your FTE for each school individually. Now, this is an optional form. You do not need to complete this form if you have a more efficient way at your LEA to calculate FTE by school. Again, it's the FTE paid for teachers, FTE teachers paid with state and local funds only, and you do not need to complete and submit this form, but you do need to calculate the total FTE by school. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. So determining comparability of services. To determine comparability of services, the LEA will work with appropriate LEA staff concerning teacher assignments, capture student enrollment data, and the full-time equivalent teacher data on the same date for every school within the LEA, and include all schools within the LEA in the student FTE teacher ratio calculation forms. To access the student FTE teacher ratio calculation form, you would visit the Title I Part A Comparability of Services webpage, and under Resources, there is a link with this form available. When you select the form and open the form up, you'll see that there are 4 tabs at the bottom of the form. It's actually an Excel spreadsheet. The first tab allows the LEA to complete the form to compare all schools within the LEA as a whole. So the LEA-wide tab allows the LEA to compare all schools within the LEA as a whole. Option 2, complete the forms in the tabs labeled individually for each grade span group to compare all schools within the LEA by grade span group individually. So that allows the LEA to compare all schools within each grade span group. This is an example, a screenshot of the form, the first form under the first tab, which is Student FTE Teacher Ratio Calculation Form for all schools LEA-wide. And the tab is labeled LEA-wide. And you'll see that there's a question at the top, comparability by LEA-wide average. The answer is yes, because that's this form. And underneath it is comparability by grade span group average, no. The LEA has chosen to include every school within the LEA on this form and compare all schools till the LEA wide average. Oops, excuse me, one too many. The next form you're seeing here is the next tab within the Excel spreadsheet form on the website, and it is the Student FTE Ratio Calculation Form by grade span group. And you'll see that the first question changed the answer to no, and now this is a comparability by grade span group average. This allows the LEA to enter every school within grade span group 1 onto the form and compare only grade span group 1 schools to the grade span group 1 average. Completing the calculation form, enter the requested information in the designated fields, starting at the top, fiscal year, LEA CDS code, and name. And then for each school individually, enter the requested information in the designated fields. School name, school type. There is a drop-down menu, and you can select the school type from that list. grade span group, enrollment, and FTE teacher. Now I'm going to show you a form that I started to complete. Again, I'm using just an example with some made up information, not an actual CDS code, but just some information so that you can see how I've started to fill out the form. So on the far left here under school name, I've entered the school under row 10, ABC Elementary School. And then I went over to the field under the school type column, and you'll see when I selected that field and clicked on it, you'll see a little caret appears for the drop-down menu. And that's where there is a list of all the school types that are available. And I selected elementary school public for this school. There's also a drop-down menu with the grade span group codes. So these are the appropriate codes that would be entered in this field, 1, 2, or 3. And this is an elementary school, so I selected 1. I entered the enrollment for the school and the total FTE teacher count for the school. And then the student to teacher ratio and is the school comparable columns, these two on the right. You need not enter any information. There is a formula in each of these fields, and this information will automatically calculate for you. So this is the student to teacher ratio for ABC Elementary School. And because I've entered other schools in, you'll see that it's starting to answer the question, is this school comparable? So what this formula is doing is it's comparing the student to teacher ratio for ABC Elementary School to the LEA-wide average. And as long as the student to teacher ratio for ABC Elementary is within a range of the average, whether it's 85% of LEA-wide average or 115% of the LEA-wide average, the school is comparable, and the answer is yes. I've also entered in 2 other elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 3 high schools. I want to bring your attention to row 16, Everly High. As you see, this is a continuation high school. And while I entered in the enrollment and the FTE, and again, we do want to encourage you to please, as required, enter every school within your LEA and your reports, you'll see that under student to teacher ratio and is the school comparable, yes or no, that the answer is exempt, because continuation high schools are exempt from meeting the comparability of services calculation requirements. These schools have a more unique setting, maybe very low student to teacher ratios, and so they are in a situation where they would not necessarily be comparable to a more traditional classroom setting. So based on a variety of criteria, we've established that certain school types are exempt. I'll talk more about school type in a few minutes, but I want to bring your attention to row 15. East Sunrise High is actually not comparable to the rest. So the LEA has one step to take before having to review and address adjustments that might need to be made to this high school. You'll see that the student to teacher ratio exceeds the LEA-wide average range below and above 15% range there. So it might behoove the LEA to then compare only those schools within each individual grade span group. So the nice thing about this form, and I have to thank the staff in our office who helped me put these forms together and our technology services division, they did a great job. And the form actually pre-populates. So you actually start in the LEA-wide average form, which is that first tab where we were. You can move over to the next tab, which is grade span group 1 schools, and the data that I put on that first form pre-populates each of the subsequent forms within this spreadsheet. So it will save you some time if you do that initially. You don't have to re-enter it because it will break it down for you by grade span group. But again, you don't need to make that decision to compare all schools. You don't need to complete this form. If you choose and would prefer to only compare grade span group codes individually, grade span group schools individually, then you would just complete these 3 forms. So let's go back over now to grade span group 3, where initially East Sunrise High School, when compared to all schools within the LEA, was not comparable, because now we're comparing the high schools to one another. You'll see that both of the high schools now are comparable to each other. So it actually took care of that issue. If there was still a no answer for any or one or more schools within these reports, then you would need to make adjustments accordingly. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. And as I mentioned, the LEAs do not enter information in the two columns on the right, the student-teacher ratio, which is the percentage, and is the school comparable, because these are formulas and they will automatically calculate the responses in these fields. So let's just talk briefly about the school type exemptions. All public schools assigned one of the following school types are exempt from meeting Title I Part A comparability of services requirements. You'll see there is a list here, and you'll see that alternative schools of choice, continuation high schools, juvenile court schools, opportunity schools, etc., are exempt from meeting Title I Part A comparability of services requirements. I just want to let you know that this list does appear on the Title I Part A Comparability of Services webpage, and you will be able to review that at your leisure when we are done with our presentation. But I wanted to include the list here to give you as much information in this presentation as possible. If you have a question about a school type within your LEA, you may verify the school type by visiting the CDE homepage, which is cde.ca.gov. And in the search box located towards the top of the page, you select the button labeled District, enter your LEA name, and click on the search button. A page will appear titled District Profile and your LEA name. When on this page, you're going to look for the link titled California School Directory, which is in the column located on the far right of the page under Related Content. Once there, you will enter the LEA name into the search box and click on the search button. A list of all schools within the LEA will appear. For every school listed, a school type will appear in the column titled District and School Type. I've taken the liberty to go ahead and enter some information into the school directory to pull up information for Elk Grove Unified. Thank you, Elk Grove. And this is an example of the results you will see when you get to this report on this page, or the search results. So there's a CDS code, the county in which the LEA is located, the LEA name or district name. And then for each school, you're going to see the school type listed. So the district and school type is listed here, elementary schools public. We only would include public schools on the comparability of services form. You only want to include schools that are in that status of active. And you would enter every school within the LEA on your report and the appropriately assigned school type as it appears on this report. We do have a timeline for determining comparability of services, and we recommend that you begin determining comparability of services during the late winter, early spring of the prior school year. So many of you have already started looking at comparability for next year, and working at the same time you might be working on your school allocations of your Title I Part A monies, or at the same time the superintendent or the HR department might be making decisions about hiring teachers or reassigning teachers based on projected enrollments for next year. The LEA shall make adjustments in schools that are not comparable, and early determination of comparability allows the LEAs to make adjustments with the least amount of disruption. So once the school year begins, you will enter in your current year data, your actual data for the current school year. And please plan on completing those towards the beginning of the school year to allow yourself time to make adjustments in staffing. We'd like you to have that completed by October 31st each year. There is a sample timeline for determining comparability on the CDE website. I've included the URL at the bottom of the screen. And I know the print's a little small. I think I have it pulled up. No, I don't know if I do. So there is detailed information here, and certainly if you have questions about this, I'm happy to answer them. You'll see that there's a timeline which starts in the January of the year, fiscal year prior to the actual year of which you will be working on your comparability calculations. One important note is regarding the timeline for the submission of your comparability calculation forms. Just to reiterate, for both 2019-2020, this fiscal year, academic year, and next, 2020-21, the comparability of services calculation forms should be completed and retained locally by you, and only submitted to the CDE upon request. In the future, we anticipate that LEAs will be able to complete and submit the calculation forms confirming that all schools within the LEA are comparable using the Consolidated Application and Reporting System. We just don't have that finalized at this time, so we will continue asking you to complete and retain the forms locally. Talking about records retention is important, and that information is on this slide. You'll see that I have several laws referenced here. The LEA must maintain source documentation for 3 years after the completion of the activity for which the funds were used to support the calculations and documentation, to demonstrate that any needed adjustments to staff assignments were made. That's based on ESSA Section 1118C3B, which is the comparability of services section of the law. Section 443 of the General Education Provisions Act, also known as GEPA, and 34 CFR, Codified Federal Regulation 76.730. I am working on updates to the Title I Part A Comparability of Services webpage, and once updates are made, I will notify LEAs via the State and Federal Programs Director listserv. So I really encourage you, if you're not already signed up for the listserv, to sign up, and we will send out periodic notices via that to alert you that we've updated the web. I want to thank you for your time. I would also like to let you know that I think there were some questions asked at the February meeting regarding comparability of services. I want to assure you that we are working on those questions diligently. You have so many great questions, and some of them are more challenging than others. So we are working with our various administrators here at the department, including our legal department, so that we can appropriately and accurately respond to some of the questions that remain. And I will keep you informed as to when decisions have been made regarding SNAE. I just want to say one other quick thing before I try to answer a few questions before we close for the day, that at the end of the PowerPoint are resources that you might look at and links so that you have that information at your fingertips. This is also available on the bottom of the Title I Part A Services, Title I Part A Comparability of Services webpage. So again, I welcome you to send emails to me at compare@cde.ca.gov. I am also available at my other email at the department. And at this point, shall I try to answer a few questions?
Sure. We don't have a lot of time. You have about 5 questions, though. And some of them, maybe they can call you directly. But we have only 1 school grade span, 2 middle grades that are funded with Title I Part A. Do we need to complete the comparability form?
I wish I could see the question. I'm sorry, Jacqueline. Hold on one moment, please. I'm trying to see how to pull that back up.
It's
in chat. Sorry, it's in chat.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry. Just disappeared.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So it's if only 1 school is funded with Title I, do we need to complete the comparability form?
Yes.
Okay. It's a grade span with 2, a middle school.
So there's a grade span. You only have schools in grade span group 2, or you have schools in each of the 3 grade spans?
They just have only 1 school in the whole district, 1 school.
Oh, only 1 school in the whole district? No.
Okay.
If there's only 1 school, there's nothing to compare that school to, so no, they would not have to. Great question.
If we pay for teachers on special assignment out of these funds, they're not in the classroom. What if we pay them we pay teachers on special assignment and they're not in the classroom?
So teachers on special assignment would not be included in your FTE teacher information, calculations on the form or on the student-to-teacher ratio. And that's because you would include the FTE for the person teaching that person's class. So if you have a third grade teacher, for example, who's on special assignment, the replacement would be teaching the class, and that's the FTE that you would report. You would not report the FTE for both of those individuals, and that would throw your FTE count off. So you would not report the teacher on special assignment FTE, only the teacher who's taking the place of that teacher in that third grade class.
What about charter schools? Is this required for charter schools?
Yes, I believe so. I better double check that, but I think so. So I apologize if I don't know that answer. Let's hold off and I'll do some verification. And did the person who asked me that question provide, did you send me your email address? Is it Anjanette? And I will respond to you after I do a little research on that.
Okay, so remember, we're out of time.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
And we wanted to have Jeff Brashears come back on. I see some of you are typing next session's comments, and May's meeting is going to be online again. And I do have to apologize. I just realized I didn't record today. I was supposed to push record, and I didn't do that. But I will be answering all your questions. I can capture those by copying them. So you really, really have to reach out to us now because I don't have this all recorded. I apologize. That was my mistake. So go ahead, Jeff. If you're still here, please come on.
I'm here, sorry. So I just wanted to come back to, there was questions about the local indicators, and as Cindy indicated, we don't anticipate dashboard language in the executive order for the LCAP. But with that, if the extension, if the timeline is extended to December 15th regarding local indicators, the state board took up action in its January meeting to change the standards for local indicators to align with the adoption of the LCAP. And so with that, those local indicators and the local indicator data must be presented to the local governing board in conjunction with the adoption of the LCAP, which would be, again, we anticipate that to be December 15th. So the local indicator data is not, if the EO is consistent with what we think it's going to say, will not be required on July 1. It will be required, the data will be required to be presented to the board in conjunction with the adoption of the LCAP on January 15th. And then just there was a couple other questions about stakeholder engagement. And again, I go back to that executive order N25. I was correct, it's page 4, number 11, and it talks about accessibility and making public meetings accessible telephonically or otherwise electronically. That applies to these committees that would be normally covered by the GREEN Act, and so you can still maintain as best you can during these times to hold up stakeholder engagement now virtually. But again, the local indicators as it stands now would, as we anticipate it to stand with the executive order, would be brought before the local governing board in conjunction with the adoption of its LCAP, which would be December 15th. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. This is Lindsay. Jacqueline, can I say one thing really quick too before we close? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. So the reward for all of you staying on this call for all 3 hours is I am going to right now put the registration link into the chat for the webinar that's coming up on Thursday on the federal funding flexibility. You guys get to be the first ones to sign in. So I just got this. So here is the registration link. It should be up and running. Go ahead and use it. And we hope to see you on Thursday regarding your questions about your flexibilities for your title funds. And of course, please email us. And we just really appreciate the support you're giving to the field. we hope that we will do everything we can to support all of you. So let us know what you need. Thanks. Jacqueline, back to you.
Okay, and I have recorded like the last from Rena, 5 minutes into Rena's talk. So actually part of it's recorded. And there's no requirement for me to get off. So if you still have questions, you can still put them in the chat. I am copying them all. I'm putting them on a Word document. I have all your questions. So they will go out to the right people. I don't want you to think those questions were lost. And again, thank you, Lindsay, for being on the whole 3 hours. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Clement. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Rena. Thank you, all of you. There's 192 of you still on with us. Thank you so much. It means so much to us that we can have you on with us today. And we thank you so much for everything you're doing for your students. And we want to remind you that in these times, it's most important for you to take care of yourself first. Just like the analogy of the airplane attendant, you have to put your oxygen on first. And we are here as your attendants to help you with any of your needs, any of your questions. As you can tell, even your own personal questions, we care about whatever it is you're having to deal with. And we have all of CDE is still working, and we are here to support you and to find the answers to those questions. And thank you also to our CASFEB board for being on with us today and for being our support out there. And anything that you can think of that we need for the May meeting, please be sure to let us know. You can email me directly. You have all of our emails. These are all the presenters' emails, and they're working, so you can email them as well. And let us know what you thought of this format and how we can make it better meet your needs. We appreciate you all so much. And CDE welcomes any suggestions. Thank you so much for being here this morning with us. And please make sure that you let everybody know that wants to be on the listserv. They can just sign themselves up. It's the link is usually in all my emails, but also you can email me directly.
And one final thing, I'm seeing some questions in the chat, additional questions. You can always send an email to covid19@cde.ca.gov. We have staff who are monitoring those emails and sending them to the correct department and division that can answer. So either contact us or that one too, and we will get your questions answered. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you too. Everybody take care. Stay safe. Okay, hi, Michael. I see your question. Can you send me an email and I will follow up? And I'm going to give you my email address. Feel free to email me and I will help follow up. As you can imagine, we've been getting a lot of bombardment and we finally have our system up and running of how we're filtering out those emails. So I'll let the CDE staff who are handling those know that some got missed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay on if anybody wants to keep asking questions. I'll mute myself, but you're welcome to write some more questions in there. There's still time, and then I'll capture them all. Don't forget to sign up for COVID-19 updates, and don't forget to find us on Facebook. All those presentations that the superintendent and the other divisions put on are still there, and you can watch the past live if you'd like.
All right, I'm just going to sit here and answer some more questions. So, Yasaria, I see your question about Title I funds in light of COVID-19. Please come to our webinar on Thursday. We're going to address that, what those flexibilities are exactly based on our federal waiver. And again, the registration for that is in the chat. I'll put it here again for everybody. just in case anybody's still on and wants to take advantage of that. Here is the webinar registration. Again, that webinar will be posted on CDE webpage, streamed on Facebook Live, and hopefully you guys will be able to get in since I'm giving this to you early.
I see that I didn't turn off the Q&A. I meant to do that, but I will capture the Q&A questions as well. Isabel said that she was asking in there, so we missed those
Oh,
questions.
great, Jacqueline, thank you. Yeah, I didn't even
turn
get
those off.
Q&A. Oh, yes, there are a lot in there, huh? Okay. Yeah, Jacqueline, thank you, because we're going to use all of these to make sure that our Q&A, FAQs address all of the questions that came up today. So,
Yeah.
okay, sounds good.
I'll copy all those again. I'll create a whole new document.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Well,
All right, everybody. Well, thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Hopefully, we'll all be together again soon in a non-COVID-19 world.
yeah.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks,
you.
Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was kind of a nervous wreck, so
You were
I'm glad.
great. Thank you. Yeah, good job.
Well, Jacqueline, shout out to Jacqueline and Lori because they both helped me when I was doing some practice sessions earlier in the week and again earlier this morning. So thank you all.
No, we love it.
Very
I love
grateful.
your commitment to the
Grateful.
state federal directors.
I'm so proud I know how to switch my screen. Pardon? Pardon?
Figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, I'm so proud I figured out how to switch my screen visuals. You know, that was a huge accomplishment. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you again.
My dog says, okay.
Hi, baby. Sweet. Bye.